Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into some seriously compelling source material today. Material suggesting the mainstream narrative about the Great Pyramid of Giza might actually be an elaborate historical cover-up. For nearly 5,000 years, we've been handed a pretty straightforward story. But today, we're unpacking claims that the facts on the ground tell a much more complicated and, frankly, absolutely fascinating tale. So you have to ask yourself, what if everything we think we know about the pyramids is just plain wrong? We're going to peel back the layers of this massive historical mystery, contrasting the accepted textbook narrative with actual physical anomalies. Anomalies that alternative researchers say leave modern engineers and geologists completely speechless. We are talking about evidence hiding right in plain sight that literally challenges the foundation of our historical timeline. Section 1. The official story. What textbooks tell us. Mainstream Egyptology claims Pharaoh Khufu built this colossal pyramid strictly as a tomb. And get this, they say he did it in just 20 short years, using thousands of workers armed with nothing but primitive hand tools. The going assumption is they used basic copper chisels, ropes, and wooden rollers. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a legendary human achievement, right? But wait until you see what happens when we actually test this theory against reality. Moving on to Section 2, Anomalies in the Stone. The physical discrepancies. When we really look at the tomb theory, there's this staggering contrast between what we'd expect to find and what's actually sitting there in the dark. Unlike literally every other known royal Egyptian tomb, the Great Pyramid contains 0 glorifying inscriptions from Khufu's era. No precious grave goods, no funerary artifacts, and absolutely no trace of Khufu's remains. If this massive structure was strictly a tomb, you'd expect a treasure trove of evidence, right? Instead, we have this striking absence that alternative researchers argue points to a completely different purpose altogether. Furthermore, deep inside the pyramid, there are these massive granite blocks weighing up to an astonishing 80 tons. 80 tons! And they weren't just lying around the site. They were transported from over 500 meters away. Critics are quick to point out that this entirely defies the limits of primitive transport. I mean, dragging blocks of that immense weight across vast distances without wheels or heavy machinery? That presents an extraordinary logistical nightmare that mainstream historians still haven't convincingly explained. And that brings us to an even bigger headache: the tooling methods. Mainstream claims insist these stones were cut using simple copper chisels and raw brute force. But the physical reality? Engineer Christopher Dunn has documented perfectly round drill cores and incredibly precise machining marks in these extraordinarily hard granite stones. This is a level of precision that modern researchers couldn't replicate even after days of non-stop effort using copper chisels. The source material argues the ancient builders were using techniques we honestly struggle to match today. So how did they pull this off inside the pitch-black pyramid? Here's another massive puzzle. If workers used traditional lighting, like torches or oil lamps, to navigate those intricate internal passageways, it remains a total mystery why there are absolutely no traces of soot or smoke residue anywhere on the ceilings. None. It's completely clean. Did they have access to some advanced form of lighting, or does this hint at a totally different construction method? Section 3. Secrets behind closed doors. The hidden chambers. The pattern of discoveries here is pretty undeniable. Back in the 1990s, Rudolf Gantenbrink's robotic camera found this mysterious limestone door with unprecedented copper handles. Then, a 2002 National Geographic team drilled a tiny hole through it, only to find a second sealed door sitting right behind it. And in 2017, muon radiography scans revealed a massive, previously unknown, hidden void above the Grand Gallery. We're talking large enough to rival the known rooms. Yet every single time, critics note that these incredible internal discoveries have been consistently halted by officials. Section 4. The Gatekeeper. Protecting the status quo. Standing firmly between these mysteries and the public is Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities. The source material highlights quotes where Hawass maintains a very rigid grip on the narrative. It points out that he's infamous among alternative researchers for blocking independent research, halting explorations right at critical moments, and fiercely defending his own established narrative against any alternative theories. Let's look at Section 5, Rewriting the Timeline, Shifting the Dates. For example, take independent researcher Robert Bauval's Orion correlation theory. He points out that the three main Giza pyramids perfectly mirror the stars of Orion's belt. But here's the catch. They do not match the sky during Pharaoh Khufu's reign. They only exactly match the constellation's position as it appeared 12,000 years ago, way back in 10,500 BC. Given that Orion symbolized the god Osiris and rebirth in their culture, Bauval suggests this implies the builders had a highly sophisticated understanding of astronomy, deliberately encoded into stone long before history says they should have been able to. Similarly, researchers John Anthony West and Dr. Robert Schoch presented evidence arguing the Great Sphinx exhibits heavy torrential water erosion. They suggest the unusual undulating weathering patterns on the Sphinx's base were caused by heavy rainfall, not wind or sand erosion like most Egyptologists claim. And this hard geological data leads to a pretty staggering conclusion about the monument's true age. 12,000 years. To put that into perspective, according to this theory, the last time the Sahara Desert experienced enough rainfall to cause this specific level of intense water erosion was at the very end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago. This pushes the origins of the Sphinx thousands of years before the ancient Egyptian civilization even existed. West's meticulously documented theory suggests Pharaoh Khafre didn't actually build the Sphinx, but merely restored it. Supporters of West call him an academic's worst nightmare, arguing that mainstream Egyptologists often just ignore this geological data because it fundamentally shatters the accepted framework of human history. Section 6. Echoes of a Lost Civilization. An Inherited Legacy. Author Graham Hancock and others propose that ancient Egyptians didn't just spontaneously develop their incredibly sophisticated skills out of nowhere. Instead, they inherited fragments of knowledge from a highly advanced, forgotten global civilization that existed before a worldwide catastrophe. Proponents see evidence of this deeply ancient timeline globally, like at the 12,000-year-old site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and they argue we see echoes of this inherited, highly advanced precision right in Egypt, from the massive granite blocks at the Osirian Temple in Abydos to the extraordinary machine-like precision of the granite boxes at the Serapeum of Saqqara. And finally, Section 7. Protecting the status quo. The motive for secrecy. The source material argues that accepting an older, more advanced civilization built these monuments would force a complete rewrite of history books across the globe. They suggest it immediately threatens the established professional reputations of academics who've built entire careers on the current timeline. It disrupts deeply held academic traditions and touches on highly sensitive issues of national pride and identity. Suggesting the monuments might not be purely Egyptian creations, well, that's a massive disruption to the whole established narrative. For these researchers, the lack of inscriptions, the unexplainable precision tooling in incredibly hard granite, and those deliberately sealed unexplored chambers all point to a singular idea. The true origin of the Great Pyramid is being intentionally kept in the dark to preserve a comfortable narrative. They argue history's greatest secrets might not be lost at all. They're simply buried by those who prefer you never ask questions. So we really have to ask ourselves, based on these claims, will the authorities ever allow true transparency behind those sealed doors, or is the mainstream narrative hiding history's biggest cover-up? Are we ready to actually confront this evidence and potentially rewrite human history? That is the provocative question you need to take away from this explainer today. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and remember,